Welcome to the Create Community Zone. My name's Adam. I'm with Resilio. If you haven't already visited us in the West Hall, we're at W3834, and we'd love to see you. But that's not why we're here today. For those of you who don't know us, Resilio has had a long history of supporting the creative and media production industry, in particular post-production facilities, for the purposes of helping them unify their operations, their remote locations, and their employees. And I have the pleasure today of having one of our very favorite customers, Danny Yoon from Mr. Wolf. Danny, hello.
Hey, thanks, Adam.
Thank you for joining me, sir.
Glad to be here.
For those who haven't met Danny before or had interacted with his facility, Mr. Wolf, they have 4 locations around the world. I see if I get this right. It's New York, Vancouver, LA, and what am I missing?
Atlanta.
Yeah.
So, basically all of the film tax credit places in the world. Right.
Very smart. See, this is why I have him there. And of course, Mr. Wolf is well known in the post community for producing some of the world's most loved media, which you would recognize as Ted Lasso, The Walking Dead series, a couple of The Walking Dead series, right?
We do a ton of episodic TV. And before that, I was doing a lot of music videos, commercials, at my prior life at places like Imaginary Forces and Motion Theory and all that stuff. So, me and my partners, we've been in the biz for a while, and we kind of in the recent years rode the whole episodic streaming TV wave, and it just kind of like exploded. So, and then as our company grew, organically, and we had to improve our infrastructure, and also we had the different locations, that proved to be a challenge to try to unify the studios and be able to work on and be on the same page for all the plates, the assets, our setups, our workflow.
Yeah, so I think, maybe a way to set this up is kind of talking about what we would call like the conventional way or the old school way of making sure that everybody has access to the file-based media that they need to do some of the work for some of the shows and episodic TV that you're working on. So let's skip ahead. We got 30 minutes. So tell us a little bit about some of the challenges you were facing at Mr. Wolf prior to Resilio. What was not working well? I know you had an incident. You could tell us the anecdote about power failure.
So we have
one of your facilities.
2 kind of epochs. We have before Resilio and then before pandemic. And so before both of those, we would sync by hand. And it would be basically SFTP, media shuttle, whatever is faster. And some poor PA coordinator would stay late at night babysitting transfers or at the end of the day, just to get reviews done in one city or the other, or to deliver to the client. And so that became untenable. And so then I started investigating other tools, syncing tools, and they were great for like kind of one-off projects, but then I started hitting a wall where indexing the sync took longer than the sync itself. And then when I was able to schedule like on the hour, then it would miss that interval because it was trying to index. And it was just, I was tearing my hair out. But we didn't find a solution until much later. We were moving our facility from Culver City in LA to a new place. But we were going to have both facilities up and running at the same time. We couldn't do a complete move. So we had to sync the jobs. And originally I was just driving over drives from one place to the other. And then I started looking for sync solutions again. And then I discovered Resilio, originally through like the consumer product, but then I realized I need the enterprise solution, which is now Resilio active everywhere. But it was called Resilio Connect at the time. And then after I was testing it for 2 weeks, then I realized oh, this is the solution for us for the move, but also for long term.
So just to kind of take it back to the business side, you hold a title partner and creative director, but you're talking about trying to find a solution for synchronizing files across multiple sites. How do you find yourself in that role of supporting IT as a business owner? Is that something that you enjoy doing? Is it something that all businesses need to consider be part IT, part business operations?
We just, because like we kind of, started as a small company, we just naturally wore a lot of hats, me and my partners. So, we have multiple roles, and, I'm still get on the box and do VFX. It kind of also came down to like, it's hard to find a really good, IT engineer and hold on to them. So then those roles kind of rested on me. But I was really actually obsessed with like, I need to find a solution with this, and also because I need to get it done right away to get this move going. Right.
So it's not just, obviously meeting deadlines because, you don't want people waiting around for things to get there, but it's also, I would suspect it's keeping your team happy, keeping them productive, keeping them feeling engaged. So an IT solution is not just getting the show to air, but it's making sure that you have happy, productive employees.
Right. Because, like I said, it became a really big problem that we couldn't ignore anymore. People were waiting on elements. We have, highly paid, artists that are just literally sitting on their hands trying to get to start to work, but the plates aren't there, One example is like, yeah, we can download the plates in LA for a show and it could be like hundreds of shots, but then our Vancouver crew still has to wait, and then they have to wait the next day to get the shots they're working on, or vice versa. So yeah, we had to find something to just, I call it friction, like to remove the friction in the workflow.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, let's talk a little bit about the old way. We have this traditional hub and spoke model, which you were operating pre-Resilio. Right. Where was that failing the most for you when you talk about like having a central point of distribution that's trying to feed out to many places?
It depended, like if the shows originated in like Atlanta, New York, whatever, like at the point of origin, it had to be distributed to the rest of the company. So, it was just on a daily basis, and you could, explore like rsync and off the shelf stuff that's already out there. There's plenty of like sync solutions. The differentiator here is that Resilio is a peer-to-peer. So if you go beyond just syncing two places, then you're kind of screwed, and you really need a peer or mesh sync solution to be able to handle this synchronization. And during the test that we did, because like Resilio is more on the closer to the metal, like it's software that runs on your NAS or your Linux, RAID or whatever, and it takes advantage of like being able to like detect file changes in real time. So as you're like, it can detect changes in millions of files. So we, as a VFX company, we deal with like image sequences, like individual image sequences. So a shot can be like, 300 frames long to 2,000 frames long. And then we have to render those frames out again, right? And so what we found after I was testing it is like an artist can render a frame, and as that frame is being rendered, it's being distributed through all the cities. And then when one city picks up that file, because it's a mesh sync and peer-to-peer, it'll actually start syncing the other node. So it literally feels like it's real time, but it's not, in the sense that if you have like 10 terabytes that aren't synced, it still takes a long time to sync it. But this is like on demand, like just syncing that you're not waiting for it.
Right. So if you're waiting, you're not creating. So there's literal dollars involved with
Right.
the process of not getting the assets to your folks when you need it. should we jump into some of the use cases that you have worked on? I think we want to talk a little bit about 2D compositing, VFX work.
Right.
Yeah. So we're going to skip ahead on a couple of these. All right. So, you want to start with multi-site NAS sync?
Right. So, we basically have the same file system in every city. But you have the flexibility to say only one show is being synced across all the cities. You don't have to sync the whole drive, literally, So you have that flexibility because you might, for instance, New York doesn't have as big a NAS capacity, as Vancouver and LA. And you couldn't physically sync the whole drive between all three cities, like every asset. In terms of compositing, like I said, has a lot of benefits. You're syncing as you're rendering, and I'm a full-time supervisor. If someone in any city is done with the shot, they'll Slack me, and then I can review that shots on my on-prem in LA and just look at the QuickTime. And I'm not jumping in remotely into the others. I'm actually seeing pixel per pixel the actual render, which is actually really important in our world because our final deliverables, we can't rely on viewing it and improving it on a compressed remote desktop.
Full res.
Right.
Yeah. What creative tools are you specifically leveraging in this process?
We're using Autodesk Flame, Nuke, Maya, and Houdini. And recently we figured out how to leverage Deadline and basically have the folder that Deadline uses to distribute the render processes.
I'm not familiar with Deadline.
Deadline is a distributed render system for Nuke and Maya. And so you can tell Deadline, here's my setup, and then have 50 machines render this one shot. So then you're, instead of waiting 100 hours to render one shot, you could do it in 1 hour amongst 100 machines. Right. And it relies on a database and also an actual physical folder to save out the setup that the clients all look at and pick up, and then they know what frames they're going to render, and then they render it back to the NAS. So before we had the sync system, you could really only render on your local in your city, in your office.
And were all the nukes and the flames all in one office?
No, yeah, that's the problem. Is one city might have more nodes than another. So then you're kind of handicapped if you're in New York, you can't render, a scene, unless you kind of remote in, and then you have to transfer all the assets and make sure everything's in the right place. Otherwise it fails. But now, all the nodes show up for the whole facility amongst all the cities. And because Deadline is syncing through Resilio, the nodes can pick it up, but they don't know that they're in a different city. And then they're rendering the frames back onto the local NAS. But as that render hits the NAS, it gets distributed to the other cities.
Right. So when did this concept of a unified virtual office occur to you? When was the light bulb moment?
It was that test when, all I really wanted was a fast sync to help me move from one office to another. And then my eyes were open oh, wow, I can actually, sync everything, and then you start thinking all the possibilities, and we didn't implement the Deadline solution right away. We just realized, oh wait, why didn't we think about this before when we had this?
Yeah. So I want to touch on hybrid work a little bit. So hybrid work has a lot of applications across industries. Everybody's remote or in the office, or in the case of media and entertainment, you're in a studio, you're on location, you're in the virtual production, you're in the field, you're doing whatever. How are you supporting that sort of distributed work.
Right. So, you know, a lot of our artists are still working remotely. And then it's also a kind of a preference thing. Like, some artists, they absolutely need to have access to plates, and not work remotely to be able to see what they're doing and just be able to deliver a better shot. And so, for those, artists and staff, they use, the desktop product. So, you can use something called selective sync, and you're not syncing the whole job folder. You're just picking and choosing. And so it basically kind of caches it. But then if you specify like a shot folder, as they render that shot folder, it actually syncs back up to all the other cities.
Mm-hmm.
But you're just selectively, you know, choosing one folder to basically sync.
Yeah.
Right?
So why have 4 offices? Just have everybody work from home.
Because the security, you know, we're kind of, bound by what the studios say about, you know, certain shows, the materials cannot leave the facility, you know. And then also, you know, we have our investment in the machines and also the file system and all that. And to be able to try to decentralize that, you know, at per individual's, you know, system and internet speed and all that, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Okay. So 2D compositing, how has Resilio supported, your animation work or your compositing work?
Right. So for, Nuke and Flame, you know, we touch upon like rendering and having the renders sync, and then I can review them immediately, no matter what city they're in. The other benefit is, setup sharing. So, the setup folders for both are synced in the job folder. And so, we do this all the time. You know, we have an artist in one location and then they might not be available. And then we're like, oh, we have a deadline, and then someone in LA picks it up. You know, so it's easy as that, or just to, kind of like distribute, templates and just like a, you know, like shot, you know, someone set up a look on a shot and do that.
What about for, outside collaborators, somebody who may be doing audio mix for a project? How are you pulling them into the project as well?
That's more like, more file transfer related. So that will use, you know, something like a secure, you know, file sharing system. We currently use Media Shuttle for that kind of stuff. And then, but still, there was that bottleneck of, you know, plates or, prep or audio. When you download it in one city, you know, the coordinator has to remember to upload it somewhere else. They might forget, or it takes a long time. And with the syncing, you don't really have to worry about that.
Yeah. Okay. So VFX. Tell us, you touched a little bit about on your rendering pipeline. What would you say, your percentage of your business is on just straight VFX work?
Meaning like versus what? Like,
versus 2D or just straight animation or, video nonlinear editing or.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
We do editorial, VFX. I'd say like, you know, 80% of our work is VFX.
Mm-hmm.
And you can break it down to like, you know, of that 80% is, 2D compositing, and then 20%, you know, CG, traditional CG and whatnot.
So on a VFX project, if you had to guess, how many millions of files are you creating for a project?
Before I came here, I looked at, the web console.
Okay.
So there's a component of Resilio Sync. It's a web console that, very easy to use, but also very flexible if you need it. And it lists all the jobs that are going on, all the files that are enumerated. So one project had 2 million files.
2 million files.
Right, because the set of files.
What was the length of the project? Was it a feature film or?
It was a TV show.
Yeah.
And then, so we had like 20 active syncs, And I added them all up approximately. It was like, probably like 12 million files that we're syncing or more, you know, and all it's doing is Resilio is really good at finding what's changed, and then it will sync not just on a file level, but on a chunk level. It can calculate the delta on a file. So like it literally is syncing as you're rendering something.
I'm trying to, in my mind, imagine how many hard drives in your car 12 million files would have been when you're
right. When I was moving from Culver, it would take a day to sneakernet, load it, sneakernet in my car. And so,
but what about data corruption? I mean, doing that work, were you ever worried about losing files or losing data as a result of that process?
There's redundancies in the way Resilio handles conflicts. So, deletions or we never really encountered like a conflict, merge conflict, but it would go into an archive folder. So that's only happened once where someone accidentally deleted like a setup file, and then I was like, oh, it's gone, and I'm like, okay, wait, I'll just find it in basically it's a trash can. Right.
Yeah. What they used to call in the Avid the Avid Attic.
Right.
3D. I think we touched a little bit on that.
Right. So, we recently figured out how to sync up Deadline. The other trick is the database part of it. We use a VPN. I believe it's zero tier to have the database on its own virtual IP network. But the actual folder is just a synced folder between all cities. And then and we have Nuke and Maya and Houdini rendering off of that.
DR. So that's kind of, you wouldn't necessarily think about disaster recovery in context of media entertainment, post-production facility, but obviously what happens? Power goes out, data center goes dark. What happens next?
Right. We had like a power outage in Vancouver one day, and it was supposed to be like a planned power outage in the building, but it kind of like
cascaded, or
it just be right. And so we were scrambling around, and then luckily the jobs that those artists were working on were synced, and so we had available workstations in LA, and they logged in that day, and they just literally just picked up the setups that they were working on the day before and just kept on working.
It's amazing.
And then we had the power restored, and all the work they had done that time when they were working, it was synced back, so there was very little time lost, which is really, yeah. And then at that time, we didn't actually sync every job. And then after that, we're like, we're going to sync every job from now on. Right. So that goes also to, like the security, audits and stuff, because they require you to have, offsite, backup. So, that could be like the
studios do.
Right. Like it could be like Blade, like AWS or, like, deep storage, cold storage or whatever. But this qualifies as like, we're literally backing up offsite, like de facto. We don't have to worry about,
you don't have to put it on Amazon Snowball.
We don't have to buy another server that resides in the city, that's backing up each other, so it helps us a lot in that respect.
Yeah. Okay. So, questions from our amazing audience, folks, for Danny. How are we doing on time? Got 5 minutes.
Any questions about sync? Yeah.
Hold on. Let me bring you the microphone.
We use Synology. Right. But, you can use Linux.
Sorry.
It kind of doesn't matter, but don't mix Windows and Linux. Don't do that. And I learned quickly because Synology supports Windows ACL and then POSIX, and mixing the two isn't a good idea. So Resilio syncs the permissions on files.
What?
Sorry.
I was like, you're using Windows, your editors, everyone's on Windows machines?
Our CG guys are, right? So, Yeah, I mean, we have scripts to just like kind of like make sure that the permissions are all POSIX, Linux type versions.
Cool. Any other questions on modern post facilities, keeping your employees productive? Any final thoughts, Danny?
No, I mean, the thing is when it works, you literally don't think about it. Like I don't think about it anymore. Like it's just there, and like you just take it for granted that the file system I'm seeing, everyone else sees the same thing. There's no lag or whatever.
Let me ask you one quick question. How hard was it just to get everything up and running?
It's not easy, but I have to really give credit to the Resilio support team. They do an amazing job, and that's what the enterprise level does for you is like they make it work. They have these systems in their labs that they can test out your configuration to a point, and they just handheld me through the whole process. And I'm not an IT guy. I know some stuff, but like that they got it working. You have the question?
So kind of from a business standpoint, after COVID, we realized there was quite a decentralization of talent throughout, just based on people's cost of living and moving around. Has Resilio made it easier for you to kind of capture that talent, whether there be layouts at other studios or anything like that, kind of just capture them wherever they are into one of your existing nodes?
Right. It helps us. It helps in that like you can support like another facility without being worried about like, okay, are we gonna have like how are we gonna actually make this a collaborative like seamless workflow, but also at the same time because you have the desktop product, you can have artists that you can onboard and they would just see like one folder that syncs, and then it would just sync back to the mothership in the whole ecosystem. But say for instance like we could say a show wants us to be in Australia or Vietnam, whatever, and now I have a solution going forward. Like, okay, probably just get a Synology, have the same exact setup, have it syncing, we're only on 5 gigabit, internet. It's like a water irrigation system that's just dripping, as opposed to like a fire hose. And so it's just because it's constantly syncing, that's all you need in terms of like, the actual bandwidth. So, before thinking about like, okay, we need to open up shop somewhere, to utilize, like talent, or we have someone off site, before that was a logistical nightmare.
Do you have a microphone? Yeah, so.
Oh wow, I'm being
transcribed on the
right.
fly. That's
through AI.
Cool.
Can
Should
you
we try to throw it a curveball?
Can you just say more about what you mean by real time? Like when you create a brand new file or several new files, like what's the experience for the remote sites?
Right. So it's not like real time in the sense of like playback in a QuickTime, right? But I would say the lag time. Well, it's hard to quantify because like say what if you're rendering a gigabit or several gigs QuickTime, right? As you're rendering that, the chunks are being synced. So then literally when the render's over, I can just by the time I go and double click on that file on my side, I can play it. It's already there, and typically it's weird. Like typically you don't have like 50 compositors all rendering at the same time. It's all staggered, so it all kind of evens out.
Yeah, I think we like to say near real time.
Near real time, right? But if the sync was failing for like a day, right? And then you built up like a terabyte or two of differences. That would take, like maybe 2 to 3 hours. Or if there's a job that we forgot to sync that was like 4 terabytes or 8 terabytes, that would take, like 18 hours. And so then you would start it and then you just tell production like, okay, it's syncing. Everyone, just be aware. And then you can see on the, web portal, and you can give, read-only, logins to production so that they're not messing around with the actual creating sync or modifying anything. And they can see, oh, wait, it's all good. And then now artists can actually start working on, that folder.
All right. So we're being told to wrap up, but can I have a round of applause for Mr. Yoon for joining us today?
Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. I appreciate your time. Glad we're able to help you be active everywhere. For those of us who haven't stopped by the West Hall, booth 3834, we'd love to see you. Say hello. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.